Good evening. I will call to order the Finance Committee meeting on June 1st, 2022 at 7 p.m. We have 4 items this evening on the agenda, and I will start with the first one, which is order number 22-100-8604A-D. Communication from Mayor Vigent in regards to revolving fund spending limits for the Public Safety Revolving Fund, the Parks and Recreation Revolving Fund, and the Council on Aging Revolving Fund, and the Water and Sewer Revolving Fund for fiscal year 2023. I'll begin by reading the letter submitted by the Mayor. Honorable President Ossing and Councilors, I'm submitting for your approval an order to set the spending limits on the city's 4 revolving funds. Parks and Recreation Revolving Fund, $350,000. Council on Aging Revolving Fund, $150,000. Public Safety Revolving Fund, $120,000. Water and Sewer Revolving Fund, $500,000. We are requesting to increase the Council on Aging Revolving Fund from $70,000 to $150,000, as noted as the recent budget hearings. We've made a temporary adjustment in the Council on Aging budget where we zeroed out numerous accounts to utilize leftover funding. This proposed increase to $150,000 will cover all FY23 expenses incurred that are not funded through the budget, ensuring all programs and services continue for our senior population. As you are aware, state law requires that revolving accounts be reauthorized prior to the start of the fiscal year. If reauthorization does not occur, all funds within the revolving account will roll over into the general fund as July 1st, 2020. Sincerely, Arthur G. Vigent, Mayor. And I open that up to the committee if they had any questions in regards to the revolving fund. As noted a couple years ago, it was at $70,000 due in the Council on Aging with the pandemic. They didn't utilize as much of the funds as they needed. So that is certainly why that was a decrease a couple years ago. Now getting back up and running, I think this is a great time to increase that amount. With no further discussions, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion is made and seconded to approve the communication from Mayor Vigent, revolving fund spending limits for the Public Safety Revolving Fund, Park and Recreation Revolving Fund, Council on Aging Revolving Fund, and the Water and Sewer Revolving Fund for fiscal year 2023. Any further discussion? All in favor? It carries 4-0. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda is order number 22-100-8605, communication from Mayor Vigent, transfer request in the amount of $1,735,807, which moves funds from and to various accounts as outlined to cover expenses for several departments for the remainder of fiscal year 2022. I'll begin by reading the letter submitted by the Mayor. Honorable President Ossing and Councilors, I'm submitting for the following year and transfer request in the amount of $1,735,807 for your approval for the following departments. $28,652 from various accounts to fund various payroll accounts. $57,000 from various accounts to legal services. $5,700 from various accounts to collector/other services. $28,000 from various accounts to IT, telephone, city, and school accounts. $1,523,205 from undesignated fund to fund the snow and ice deficit for FY 2022. $28,250 from undesignated fund to the open space stabilization account, and $65,000 from various accounts to solid waste disposal and natural gas accounts. My staff and I will be available for future Finance Committee meetings to answer any questions. Sincerely, Arthur G. Vigent, Mayor. And I will open that up to the committee if they have a question on any particular line item that they wish to speak with the department head that may be here this evening. And a note from the last year's prior, it is an increase this year in the snow and ice removal. Any questions in regards? I will, no discussion, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve Order 22-100-8605. Transfer request in the amount of $1,735,807, which moves funds from and to various accounts as outlined to cover expenses for several departments for the remainder of fiscal year 2022. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carries 4-0, and for the committee members, I will be asking for a suspension for the next city council meeting, if that's okay with the committee. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item is order number 22-100-8611. Communication from Mayor Vision, a grant acceptance in the amount of $219,982 from Community Compact Cabinet's Municipal Fiber Program awarded to Information Technology to be used to replace the Banner copper network lines used for radio communications. I'll begin by reading the letter submitted by the mayor. Honorable President Austin and councilors, I'm submitting the enclosed acceptance in the amount of $219,982 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and their inaugural round of the Community Compact Cabinet's new municipal fiber grant program. This award will allow the IT department to replace a portion of our old copper Banner, old copper network lines for radio communications, lines around the city, and add fiber optics to water tank areas along with security cameras. In addition, we will be creating a redundancy line, a fiber loop ring around the downtown area. We currently have an estimated of 400 strands of fiber coming out of City Hall that is connected to a pole on Route 85 and Main Street. This will give us an additional protection. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Governor Baker and his administration for providing this vital funding to upgrade the city's fiber network. Sincerely, Arthur G. Midget, Mayor. And, Council Perlin.
Thank you. I just had a quick question for the increased concentration around City Hall. Is that just given how much activity is coming out of City Hall? Or how come there's a redundancy there?
I'm sorry.
I'm wondering why there's an additional extra strands of fiber coming out of City Hall. Is that just, if I'm reading the letter correctly from what you said about the redundancy line around downtown, is that just because of the increased proximity of so many businesses in different areas that it would need another redundancy? It's an area I'm not very familiar with, but I was just wondering.
I know over the last couple of years, they've been trying to do an upgrade on some of those lines, but that I could not personally answer. I don't, Mr. Mayor, if you, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And I'm not going to try to fudge my way through that question. So, and Mr. Gibbs had some family issues today, so I thought he was going to be back here tonight, but he's not. I would, you could table this item until the next meeting, and we'll deal with it at that time. And we can answer those questions for your council.
Thank you. I mean, I don't want to uphold the entire approval. I know it's a grant that we received, but maybe we can get that information from Director Gibbs and have it be forwarded to the council.
Yeah, I mean, I would not mind going forward with this, but we can get an email, and then, if possible, we can always have a suspension on our next council meeting. Obviously, the mayor would know best. I didn't know if there was a time constraint on this particular grant.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President.
So, Mr. Chair, so there is a little bit of time urgency to this. I would ask Councilor Perlman if that's something you want, just call Mr. Gibbs and ask him, and you can get that. If that answer doesn't to your liking, when it comes up for a vote, you can actually bring that up. But I mean, it's unfortunate he's not here, but it's okay. Things happen. Yeah. But I would just call Mr. Gibbs, at your convenience, get the question answered to what you want, and then if you're happy with it, then the issue's all set. If not, you can bring it back and report back to the full council what the concern is.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I don't have issue with this moving forward. It was just more of a informational
And it's a
purposes
very-
type question, but I'm happy to contact Director Gibbs directly and share that information back with the council so they also are aware.
And that was a very good question, Counselor. Counselor Roby.
Thank you. The grant notes that there is some matching funding that has to come from PEG funds. Remind me, has that already been approved, or will that be a future request?
That has not been approved, and thank you for bringing that up, because I do remember when the finance team was reviewing the WMCT-TV budget, those questions did come up in regards to utilizing those PEG funds at that time. I know that has been a bit of an issue going forward, counselors, and I would be fine if we could maybe have the funds be taken from a different source. But I'll leave that up to the committee and counselors.
Sorry, I guess a follow-up would be, since it says that's where they're coming in the grant, does that make a difference if we change where they're coming from?
I think it's just that we have to do the matching funds.
If I can,
President
Mr. Chair,
Hudson.
and I'll let the mayor correct me, but the matching funds is what they're proposing. If the council wants to recommend something else, we can, but the mayor would have to ultimately say where the funds are coming from. I think councils remember the issue we have with the PEG funds is the amount of new customers coming in, the amount that we're receiving is challenging our annual operations going forward. And I think we were pretty clear at our last meeting when we approved the cable station's budget that we would prefer not to see those type of transfers from the PEG funds until the PEG funds, built up a little bit, because we know the station needs items. I mean, I'm happy to help the mayor if he wants to pick other accounts. I've got my suggestions, whether it's free cash or ARPA, but I would recommend that the Finance Committee, if they do approve the grant, that they ask that the matching funds come from somewhere other than the PEG account.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council Perman.
Motion to approve, and I agree, I don't know if that's something we have to put into the motion, but that I would prefer that the funding does not come out of the PEG account. I know that the TV station has a very lean budget already, and so I would want to see those funds reserved for their use.
Understand. I will, motion has been made and seconded to approve the grant acceptance in the amount of $219,982 from Community Compact Cabinet's Municipal Fiber Program awarded to Information Technology to be used to replace the Banner copper network lines used for radio communications, as well as extracting the matching funds from other source. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carries 4-0. Thank you, committee. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda is order number 22-100-8606. Communication from Mayor Vigil, transfer request in the amount of $1 million from undesignated fund to the library building renovations to cover unanticipated cost overruns. I'll begin by reading the letter submitted by the mayor, Honorable President Ossing, and councilors. Enclosed for your review and approval is a transfer in the amount of $1 million from free cash to cover unanticipated overruns. The terracotta main entrance to the library, West Main Street, is constructed of large masonry units that are steel reinforced and tie back into the masonry front wall. During renovations, it was discovered that many components of the steel reinforcement have severely rotted due to their age. The recommended repair is to remove the blocks in the entirety, repair the steel reinforcing in the blocks and brick wall, and reinstall them, including repair or replacement of the blocks that are non-repairable. The anticipated cost to do these repairs is $1 million. A decision needs to be made on whether we have them repaired or replaced with a cheaper version. Sincerely, Arthur G. Vigent, Mayor. And on this, I will bring up Director Gardello and Commissioner Dival, please. Good evening. And if you could kind of give a bit of an overview on that. I mean, I personally didn't know there was a terracotta part of that. So to kind of inform the council on that and the direction we can go in. Thank you.
Sure, I can take that question. So,
Turn the mic on, Sean. The mic.
is that better? So the part of the library that we're talking about is the facade on the West Main Street side of the building. And specifically, we're talking about the triangular pediment, it's called a pediment, over the main entrance into the library. And so what you see there, if you drive by or walk by, is decorative terracotta blocks that form that triangle. And as part of the project, it was identified that some of the blocks needed some repair. But then as we got into the project and did some exploring, it turned out there was more blocks that needed repair. And so we kind of stopped for a minute and through our architect, got an expert in to take a look at it. And so what was found was that these blocks have a kind of like a interlocking kind of tongue and groove kind of thing that holds them together, as well as some steel supports underneath. And those steel supports go behind the terracotta to what's called a brick backup wall. And so over time, these blocks have shifted. The mortar between the blocks has fallen out. That's allowed water to go in. And in 120 years, you can imagine that water's wreaked a lot of havoc in there. And so it's caused some deterioration, some pretty advanced rotting of the steel structure that holds part of it up. And as steel rots, it expands and exerts quite a force. And so that also makes more separation between the blocks, more water gets in. It's a doom loop there. So we have a couple of options on how to fix this. One is to take it all down and replace it all with modern materials, or the other option is to take the blocks down, repair them as necessary, replace as necessary, and put those back up. My recommendation to the committee, to the council, is to go with the repair and replace option. At great expense, the city is building an addition onto this historic library. And one could argue is spending more money to build the building, the addition where it's located, to build off of the existing library. And so if we're doing that, then my recommendation is we should restore what we can. And this is front-facing, to me, I think it makes most sense to try to keep what's there and put it back into a historically kind of delicate manner so that it looks like it did in 1903. So the mixture of fixing the backup wall, the steel reinforcement, taking the blocks off, and that's a feat unto itself, because each block has to be taken off as carefully as possible, arranged in a way so that we don't mismatch where one block goes and the other one goes. Fix the backup wall, fix the blocks, put it all back in a way that's going to last for another 100 years. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Commissioner Duval. Now, Margaret as well, does any decision-making have to be made with the Historical Commission at all in regards to any repairs at that point? Okay. All right, I'll leave it up to the rest of the council if they have any questions. Councilor Brown.
Thank you. That was, your explanation was really helpful. It actually answered some of the questions that I had. But one of the questions that I have, considering that you recommend doing more of the repair and replace, are there any mitigation techniques that you might be able to use with modern techniques and technology to prevent future water damage, or that same type of damage to the steel to happen again in the future? Just kind of thinking along the lines of, that building's been there for as long as it has, more than 100 years. And now we're sitting here in current times having this conversation. I'm thinking more toward the future, that 100 years from now, are people going to be having this conversation? And, is there any way, if we do the repair and replace, to see if we might get more life out of it, or would we be looking at the same thing in about the same time frame?
I wish I had a crystal ball. If I did, I'd be a multimillionaire. Certainly, we have materials now that our forefathers and mothers didn't have. And so all of the options available to us will be put in play for sure. I would not want to do this without having longevity in mind. And so we will build it to the best of our ability in hopes that it will be there for another 100 years. Whether it makes it or not, we won't be here. But we will do the best we can for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Perman.
Thank you. I also want to just speak about this. I'm definitely in support. I think the maintenance of the historic element of the library is so important, and definitely, it is a cost, but we're definitely going to be saving in the long run. I think if we put some modern material, we can't go back and say, oh, we should have done the lovely historic element that was there from the early 1900s when it was first put in. And so I really do appreciate the thought that went into this to make sure that historic element of the Carnegie Library remains. And I guess one question I have is, does it increase the time of the project at all by doing this method? I'm assuming not, given that it's just a switch of what needs to be done rather than, so many tasks, but you did mention, the laborious elements of taking out, the bricks and replacing the blocks. So I want to make sure that will still maintain the timeline that we have for the library.
The timeline is unaffected because this is not a critical path item. So the rest of the library could be built essentially while this is getting rectified.
Okay, wonderful. And I will just say, because I know many of us were there earlier, that it was a lovely topping off ceremony today for the library. And so, seeing the new elements merging with the historic elements of the library was very beautiful. And I know the community is really going to be excited when it goes live in a little bit, right? So hopefully next summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think restoring this into its historical ability is important to this. Are these the stones that are actually on the bottom, like the walk area, or is it in the rafters?
So these are up top. So as you
Okay.
walk in the front door, it's above your head. It's that triangle, pediment of the columns, and then the horizontal piece, and then the triangle that lives on top of that. That's what we're talking about. Is up top.
Okay. And the terracotta is it's from a quarry, right?
So it's a cast product. It's
Oh.
a molded clay and other aggregate.
Okay, so it's easy to match the color if necessary.
Yes.
Much better than natural stone, that's where I was going.
Right,
That's
right.
great. Okay, thank you.
Council Roby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess I'm curious how you came up with the million. How do you know that you're not going to have to replace all of them? And if you do, you've way underestimated. And if you don't have to repair that many, what do you do with what's left over from the million? And how does all that fit into the contingency that already exists? So sort of multi.
So as I mentioned, we brought in an expert to take a look at it. And at this point, it's all, the best estimate that we can do, because we haven't disassembled the whole thing to see what the damage is. We can make some fairly educated estimates on what the damage is and educated estimates on what it would cost to fix. We believe that 1 million is an overestimate. I don't want to have to come back to say that it's more, and knock on wood. This is being recorded. Hopefully, I don't have to come back. But we think it's more than we need, and that's based on what the expert has told us.
And so how, if, and I guess I would knock on wood, that it is over, how, does that money then come back to the city? Or does it just kind of get added into the contingency for you to be able to spend it on anything else that are overruns?
So the vote of this finance committee and the city council would be to put this into the project, because it's transfers from free cash to the project, and then it stays with the project unless it is then, voted back out, I believe.
Okay, so there's no guarantee we would get any cost difference if it's part of the project that could just get spent on other things that come up?
I suppose if that's, the will of the mayor and the council.
Okay, that's,
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is adding $1 million to the project. We have about $1.2 million in contingencies in there now. We're about $500,000 into those contingencies. We are, if you look at the budget and the original proposal and the timeline as we've been going through, until more money is raised, we're still short at the project. So, is this coming back to the city? Probably not. I'm not gonna make promises that we're gonna, if we get these tiles for $900,000, the other $100,000 is coming back. We got a long ways to go in the project, and, we got the final piece of steel up today, but I'm not gonna make any promises. We're sending it back, and we're not gonna have a separate set of books for just these tiles.
Council Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It sounds like it's fortuitous that this was discovered. Was there any risk of collapse as it deteriorated to that extent? And I'm also concerned, I'm guessing, I feel confident you're taking safety into consideration, but how much of it is a risk that as you disassemble it, the whole thing will crumble? Like, how bad of a shape is it?
Well, I think we actually got lucky. When our expert took a look at it, came back and said this maybe had 2 or 3, maybe 5 years left before it just totally crashed and fell. And it wasn't far off to say that any one of those stones could have fallen at any time, and if somebody were walking in or out, could have gotten injured. So we got lucky.
And just that follow-up, are you particularly concerned about this deconstruction and repair at particular safety? Is there a particular safety risk that I'm sure you're taking every precaution, but how risky is this task?
It's not, because the contractor has put staging in front, so nothing is in danger of falling to the ground. It would only fall maybe a couple feet onto the staging plank, so I'm not concerned about safety of the contractor. And it's all cordoned off, so public can't be anywhere near it, so we should be okay there.
Thank you, Council Wagner. Councilor Nabin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope the irony is not lost on anyone in the project that the steel in the original Carnegie building is what's rotting. It's fairly humorous to me, only because it was discovered and no one's gotten hurt, but I can appreciate that. And I don't think, right, I mean, this is an old building, and I completely support the path that you want to take. It is a beautiful building. We're lucky to have had the original grant. And it does provide a pretty spectacular entrance to downtown, and since it will be covered in glass, so people will be able to see the original building and appreciate it. So, and I think to the mayor's point, anytime you touch any building that's that old, if anyone else lives in a older home, you can appreciate that if you have to change a doorknob, chances are you're replacing a window on the other side of it. So I'm sure that money will get replaced, and probably some more as well. I wanted to follow up on the chair's question about, I assume the Marlborough Historic Commission, you don't have anything, but there's nothing with Mass Historic or anything that oversees the building and the requirements that you guys are required to take?
We informed them early on of our project and the parameters of our project, but it's only an informational kind of thing.
That's great.
They're aware of it.
Okay.
Speak into the mic.
Is your mic on?
No, it's not on.
There is no requirement other than to notify them of the project, and we did that very early on.
That's great. It's great to have the freedom to make those decisions, so thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Nabin. Any further, Councilor Dumas?
Thank you. I guess, how was this discovered? Because my concern is now that once we're going through the whole building of the original, has other inspections being taken place as we remodel?
So this was discovered because as part of the original contract, there was some blocks that were noted as having chipped or spalled or out of alignment. So when the contractor went there to explore and take a look at it, looked at it and said, well, wait a minute, this is way more than what was originally contemplated as part of the project. So that put the brakes on it. That's what caused us to then bring in the expert and get into it. As far as the rest of the project goes, the rest of the building goes, it is well built. It is very well built, and we should be very thankful for that There was some foresight when this building was put together that it is built to last a very long time. So we haven't seen any other surprises to this point. I don't expect that we will, because we've gone through the building and we've essentially gutted the interior. We've taken a look at all of the structural elements of the building, and there's no showstoppers there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Well, I was just going to motion to approve if there was no further discussion.
I will second that. Motion has been made and seconded to approve the transfer request in the amount of $1 million from undesignated fund to library building renovations to cover unanticipated cost overruns. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carries 4-0. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you,
Thank you
Margaret.
very much.
Motion to adjourn?
Before we adjourn, I would like to also see if the committee is okay with asking for a suspension on that item. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
I will second that. Motion was made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor? It carries. We are adjourned at 7:31 PM. Thank you, Finance.